Let's just get straight into it. So do a stand-up first. We got 2 items on the agenda, but we'll get through stand-up first. So Bradley, you're first.
Sure. So I've been working with John David Dalton, kind of discussing what could happen if we removed some ambiguity that is present between the different grammars in the ECMAScript spec. That led to publishing something called I think it was Unambiguous JavaScript Grammar repository, which hopefully John gets a little bit of time to talk about today. That's it.
Next would be Ben, but I don't think he's here, so that then brings us to Nikita.
Just some issue and pull request reviews, and nothing significant, I think. Next is Chris.
Hi. Just got back from NodeConf. Started work with Ashley Williams, Forrest Norval, and Jeremiah on a summary site summarizing the state of the modules discussion. I'm trying to put the finishing touches on it today. It'll be up at modules.guide, which I just found out was a TLD. So I think next up would be Colin, if he's here. Nope. Evan?
Yeah, I've been working on the some of the security issues and trying to prepare for the security release coming out tomorrow. I'm not sure who's next after me. I don't have the list.
Jeremiah's next.
I think that'd be me. I missed the previous week's call, so the previous week I'd fixed the OSX SDIO sort of bug, the main one anyways. I was at NodeConf this week and haven't really done anything else. Next is Fedora.
Looks like Fedor added notes, but I don't think he's here, so I'm just going to read them out loud for people in internet streaming land, if that's all right. Been fixing bugs, reviewing PRs, and working on LL node. And next is Josh.
Yep, I've just been working on the debug protocol stuff. Next is Michael Dawson.
Okay, so I'm still chasing down some PPC machine issues, a little bit of work with Imran on the AX-MLX0 issues, working with Stefan and Ian on the ABI stable module API. We're starting to fill in some of the NAN examples. Some input on some benchmarking related PRs, generally keeping up with issues and other miscellaneous reviews and land. I think next is Brian White.
No,
Okay.
next is me.
Oh.
Hang on, let me go.
Okay.
So, but where's my name's gone?
Yeah, I don't know. Somehow I think you typed your stuff under mine for some reason.
You're further down below after me.
Yeah, Rod, you're after Alexis. It is Brian White who's next.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on there. Go, Brian.
Okay, not a whole lot for me. I landed some old PRs and submitted some PRs after that to fix some regressions introduced by some of those PRs. And that was pretty much it, other than just reviewing PRs and issues as normal. Next is Ali.
So I've been doing some more work on V8 Inspector and also starting to take a look at some backports that are needed for some bug fixes in V8 for LTS. Next is Alexis.
Yes, hello. I fixed an issue in Node.js. There's a breakage with Visual Studio Update 3. which is currently in preview still. So it's been fixed in Node.js, but we need to propagate it to Node, and we can expect a bunch of bug reports if we don't get this into Node in time. Other than that, we're working on a few issues, but nothing significant. Next is Rod.
Okay, I'll really make go now. Okay, so tinkering with Alpine Linux support in CI. Getting that to green. Very positive response to community announcing that that's in CI. So I think people are really looking forward to that because it's very popular for Docker. Security release stuff, just trying to wrangle that. Reviews, discussions on GitHub, so much going on. Been working a bit on the Electron and Node relationship. I have a meeting lined up with the Electron team. I think that's been pushed to next week. Just looking at how we can work together better and sort out some of the technical issues between us. Particularly, there's one at the moment with regard to the ABI version incompatibility at the moment. They are identifying as currently compatible with our version 6 ABI, but they've bumped their version of V8, which is no longer ABI compatible. So it's a bit of a drama for users. CTC repo, starting some discussions in there, just getting things out that have been floating around but not properly documented anywhere. So it's good to get that somewhere down. And the usual Jenkins upkeep. Johan Bergstrom's been away and he's been busy, so I've been picking up a bit of load there. And next is Rich.
I'm setting up the next onboarding, and I also was at NodeConf and did not get to participate much, but the one thing I did do was facilitate a session that Miles actually was supposed to facilitate, but then he realized he had a conflict on releases and what users' pain points are with them and what they like and so on and so forth. I have some brief notes along with names attached to certain comments and viewpoints. I'm going to share it with the build working group, the LTS working group, anyone who can sign a release, and if you can think of other people I should share it with, let me know. Next up is Trevor.
Okay, so I finished the async graph EP, at least the rewrite, and it's posted and waiting for further review. Because of that and the feedback I got on it, I'm investigating the feasibility of the implementation, or at least how difficult it would be to do that. I'm helping out a little bit with an issue in the Atom editor. They have an issue where they're attempting to write files over like a mounted network drive or something, and it blows up in their faces. Also reviewed PRs as usual. That's it.
Okay, we missed anyone? No. Okay. Review of last meeting. We talked a little bit about standard I/O problems, but without Jeremiah, we didn't make much progress there. And we talked about exposing run in this context on the module object, and we decided to push that back to GitHub for discussion. We would like a nicer API for that rather than just exposing something that can be monkey patched. So discussion is back on GitHub. Would be good to push that forward, but I guess without a good proposal, it's difficult. So if you are interested in engaging in that discussion, please go to issue 6288. It's not one of those things that it's not going to be top of mind for anyone, but it would be nice to get that out there to assist with startup speed for embedders particularly. So getting into the issues for discussion today, the issue number 7234, which is return valid file URLs from url.format. We put this on the agenda.
Yeah, it's a
Rich.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, go for it.
So this is a breaking change at Semver Major, which is the reason it's, our documents say that Semver Major changes need to be reviewed by the CTC. It has one LGTM from a CTC member. It's a kind of a corner case, and it's also a bit of a we're fixing the one URL format that's easy to fix and straightforward to fix. The real fix is probably James's proposal for a what WG compliant URL parsing / formatting thing. But anyway, I did just want to give CTC one last opportunity to say, whoa, don't land this yet, or don't land this at all before I go ahead and land it in the next, several hours, I guess. Great.
So you're suggesting that are there other protocols where we're not slashing them properly, or is it?
Yeah, there
like,
are.
Is it just?
There are in fact other protocols where a single slash is not valid. I mean, HTTP would be the big one. I actually initially went to go ahead and just fix all of the ones that require it, but it turns out that it gets kind of complicated and ambiguous at like trying to figure out what the user meant with the file URL is pretty straightforward. Trying to figure out what they meant, if there's only one slash with HTTP, is the first thing a host name, or should it just be localhost, or do they mean a file URL? It's obvious in the context of a web page, but absent that context, which it is in Node, things get kind of weird pretty fast. So that change became complicated and included a ton of breakage. So I sort of backpedaled to just fixing I started to do this in response to an issue someone filed quite some time ago that's been dormant, that was just about the file URL. And so that's why I only fixed that one.
So does the what WG URL spec or parser identify the host as / for file URLs like you're doing here?
I'm not completely sure I understand the question, but maybe I ought to look at the PR.
Well, yeah, okay. When you identify that the protocol is file, you make the host /less.
Oh, yeah. That's behavior adopted from what browsers do. If you type file : if you leave off if you do file : / path, browsers will just convert that to file : / path. So that's just emulating what a browser does.
Yeah, you can see that by doing the same thing in new URL and just typing in file : / and then everything else, and it'll populate all of its fields properly.
I'm just surprised that the host is // but okay.
Well, it's
Fine.
not. The host is empty, but that's like a trick to just get the double slash in there.
Is that double slash? Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out too. Is a double slash really one slash somehow? What is it? File : / //?
It's file : / //. The correct URL. The file URL requires file : / 2 slashes, and then an optional host name, and then an absolute path. So if you don't specify the host name, you need 3 slashes. If you do specify the host name, it's 2 slashes. It can never be 1 slash. 1 slash is invalid, but browsers, liberal what you accept, strict what you put out, all that stuff.
Okay.
This host variable that you're setting is only for internal consumption. It's not actually setting the host property or the URL object. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Fusion. Okay. Doesn't sound like there's any objections here. Anything anyone wants to talk about here before we move on?
I'll leave it open for another 24 hours if people want actual time to look at it.
Okay, next item. So this is issue number 6102. Don't inherit from object.prototype. And Brian, I think this is yours. Did you put this one on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, take it away.
Okay, well, this is fairly simple. We already ship a query string change that we just use an object that doesn't inherit from object. It's like just a bare plain object. And then I submitted a PR to do basically the same thing for the HTTP headers object, the object we use to store headers and values in. But people seem to be a little bit more vocal about that. And so that's kind of why I'm bringing it here, to see what people thought about that. As far as any concerns or risks, what if people thought it would be acceptable, or some people suggested cherry picking some of the methods from object.prototype, but I'm thinking it should be more of an all or nothing type of thing rather than cherry picking, but that's my opinion. So
Well,
I think we should probably do this because it means that weird properties that you might get if you don't validate them, like __ proto and stuff, don't terribly break things. But at the same time, it's really awkward because stuff like toString and value of stop working if you try to stringify it.
I was just going to ask about has-on property and what our kind of feeling on how many people are maybe looping over the headers object and using has-on property to check that the value is actually a property of the object is. I mean, notably, this would break anyway. Sorry.
I think that that's somewhat common code, but at the same time, if you're using has-on property directly, then that's kind of a risk in the first place.
A risk that it would throw an exception. Yeah. We're just changing the thing it would throw an exception on, I guess. It would sometimes throw an exception if someone sent a header that had the key has-on property versus. Well, no, actually, it wouldn't fail because we lowercase all headers.
Okay, this is going to sound completely ridiculous, but I'm just throwing it out there. So there are specific objects, object properties. It seems that people want to propagate to it, but since we're doing customs anyway, why don't we not just simply cherry pick, but include each one in kind of a wrapper and somehow? I'm just loosely thinking I don't know if they were to call it as a function, then you'd return as a function. But if you just ask for the property, then it might be looking for a string. Just some kind of munging them together, so that for future wanting to remove all of them, but at the same time still be backwards compatible for the moment, but deprecating hey, you can't use any of those normal object methods for the moment or in the future.
Are you saying you would hand back a wrapper and then the wrapper would inherit from the parentless object that has the headers on it?
Maybe. I'm. This is really half thought through as I'm saying it. Well, but say we set has-on property, right? But then also there's a has-on property symbol in the object that kind of sits outside of the area of concern. And if there's a header that's called has-on property, then that can be set on the symbol. Then if they call has-on property, we can look and say, is there a header field that matches this, or do we want to run the normal has-on property method?
Can you think of a way of doing that fast?
No, but like I don't think it'd be much slower than if they were to run has own property on its own, right? A symbol lookup's pretty cheap.
Should we? So another point of curiosity is, since this could break programs that currently work, should we, instead of moving it off of turning the headers object into a bare object, instead start inheriting from something that would start warning on access, do a deprecation cycle on it?
I mean, it's kind of hard to judge, right? Because like we changed this in URL parser and in event emitter, I think, and we haven't really had anyone complain yet. Maybe that's just because not enough people are using V6 yet. I don't really know.
Yeah, I wonder
a
about
lot of
that.
people use the headers property. Hard to gauge.
I mean, I know it broke like in code that I have for when we made the change for query string, but I don't know. I at first I was a lot more hesitant, but I think that it's the right decision so we can actually allow properties that we could not otherwise allow.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree.
Like the __ proto.
I totally agree that's where we should head. I just wonder if we should do a deprecation cycle of some sort and give people a heads up that we're going to be moving this cheese.
So how would a deprecation cycle work on this?
So this is similarly foggy. You would, instead of making it a bare object, you would instead insert an object between object.prototype and the headers object that would wrap all the methods of object.prototype and with a deprecation warning. So has own property would still call has own property, but it would additionally warn that we were going to be removing this in the future.
Well, since that bare object is used for for query string and the storage object is used for query string and some others now, would we have to have two storage objects at that point, or would we change the behavior again of query strings and just deprecate instead of throw?
I would tend towards deprecation, and we could just create one instance of the deprecation object, just to stick to that deprecation cycle. But I say this, I haven't migrated any of the registry servers to Node 6 yet, so I don't know what the effect is on our servers. But I would imagine that there's at least a couple of places where it might bite us.
I mean, we are talking about this being a Simber major change regardless, though, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
It
but
wouldn't land in V6, but I do understand the deprecation cycle. I do think that could be a good idea.
okay, so I misunderstood. I thought this was landing on V6. If it's landing on V7, we can probably do a deprecation cycle within V6. Maybe not.
If you're gonna insert that deprecation interceptor or whatever anyway, then can you do the thing Trevor just suggested with the same thing? Or is there, meaning Trevor suggested, as I understood it, look if there's an actual header with that name and otherwise delegate to the object.prototype member. Sounds like the deprecation would come from a similar interceptor.
Yeah, but the idea with the deprecation is that eventually we can remove it, like in the next majors.
Okay. Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is that this headers object is everything in there is lowercase, or all the headers will be lowercase when they hit the object. So things like toString or has own property, things like that can't be overridden by user set headers theoretically. So this is just a way to say, hey, we're totally going to break this because we don't want to allow overriding __ proto __. But we'll give you some lead time on moving your code over.
Nikita, have we been able to do a search through the registry? Although I do think that this would probably affect a lot more application code versus like package code. So that may not be an accurate representation.
I don't know. There's a lot of library code that touches this sort of thing in HTTP, like headers in specific.
You mean for has own property or something like that? Ivan,
Yeah, it's probably the easiest one to check for.
Or if it gets passed to like _ keys or _ keys.
I think yes, that would be possible, but could we move this to the issue? I mean, to the actual PR. The discussion about what exactly should be searched.
Yeah, we should do that.
Okay, should we move these proposals back to GitHub and just move on? Any objection to doing that? I don't think we've got anything concrete to decide here yet, but it can come back if need be. You okay with that, Brian?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, moving on. Let's just do. Should we do QA first, or should we chat about modules first? Let's do modules. We've still got a bit of time, so let's talk modules first. Bradley, do you want to introduce this and tell us what we're going to be talking about here?
Yeah, I'm gonna introduce it and then hand it off to John. Basically, the idea is that we have problems with ambiguity in parsing as a major concern for how we could support ES modules. We wanted to take a new approach and ask if we could remove that ambiguity, what could we do? And so this proposal supposes that we get some buy-in from the ECMAScript spec, basically. Several members of TC39 have been willing to look at the spec again, which kind of has led to this being opened as a thing to investigate. So over the past 2 weeks or so, John has done a lot of work in discussing with me what his concerns are, what our concerns are, and moved forward after discussing with a lot of other stakeholders. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John, and you can take it away.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Testing. Yes. All right, cool. In the chat log, I linked to the proposal of unambiguous JavaScript grammar. I also linked to the section that it would be replacing in the existing proposal for tackling ES module detection. So if everyone pulls that up, you'll see the proposal there. It hinges on the ability to distinguish an ES module by requiring at least an import or export. If it has either one of those, then we can detect through parsing that it is a module goal. So that's the key. That's what we're going to be talking about this at the July TC39 meeting. It's on the agenda now, so we'll bring that up there. So with that, there would be no need for a file extension change, extra metadata in the package.json. There would be less need for special file names, things like that, because you could, with a parse pass, figure out if it what goal it is. So the proposal here is that you parse looking for one goal. If that fails, you parse looking for the other goal. And then after that, it's neither goal, so then it would error out. We give wiggle room so that over time, you can change the order in which is the preferred goal. Starting off, the preferred goal would be CommonJS. Over time, you could change that preferred goal to ES module. The big hitters for things like this in the past has been performance. And so on the TLDR, that's one of the first things there, where the first thing is that CommonJS modules and ES modules just work without new extensions, extra ceremony, or additional scaffolding. The next one is that performance is generally on par or better than existing CommonJS module loading, because that's important. Bradley has worked with Trevor and some others benchmarking the possibility of caching and looking at the existing state of parsing and the cost for that. With caching and leveraging things like bytecode caching, that's where the performance could actually be improved over the existing loading. I wanted to call out that performance for ES modules would still be significantly improved over transpilation workflows. So people using ES modules now are used to a certain speed hit when transpiling and working with them in their day-to-day. This should still be significantly faster even with the parse because of the cache that's there for files that aren't touched or aren't modified. Let's see if there's anything extra there. We also have adopted the modules.root key from the Defense of JS proposal. It should be noted that this whole proposal that Bradley and I started working on came out of discussions from the Defense of JS proposal and the existing proposal to try to find something that folks could agree on. So let's see if there's anything super solid there. The spec goes into the mechanics of how to resolve modules.root a little bit more than the previous proposal did. And that's the gist. Without that, with the parsing technique, it also can actually help other areas too. So I left an example in the proposal where Microsoft packaged web apps can benefit from this. At the moment, even though, so Edge, for those that don't know, Edge has experimental support for loading ES modules with the type equals module attribute for a script. But even with that, there's no way, for example, from the packaged web app standpoint that it knows what mode or goal the script file is in. So when it generates its bytecode for its bytecode optimization, it generates it as a non-module goal. And then if it is a module, it has to throw that away. If the ambiguity was removed, then they could actually generate the correct bytecode for its cache on its first go, which is better for launch time performance for these apps. So that was my outside the Node ecosystem note there, because it cuts into applications, it cuts into the browser a bit, and it also deals with module loading. So that's the goal there. In terms of caching, it looks like there is still room for improvement as well. So it's not like this is a dead end there on the cache perf. I've got Chakra has bytecode caching that we could leverage. V8, I believe, now has bytecode caching too. So this is something that engines are equipped for, and looks like something that we could do. What's nice about this too is it leaves less things hanging on for people moving into ES modules in the future. So, for example, you wouldn't have it doesn't fundamentally change the ecosystem. It doesn't create a new file name. It allows for a more seamless flow from one to the other without big impact. So that's the proposal.
I have a
Thanks for
couple
that.
questions.
Okay, question.
Cool. I've been looking over this for a bit now. So I've got a bunch of questions, but so we may actually at some point want to schedule another like follow-on meeting just for ES modules, just so we have full time. But the first question I have, when you talk about bytecode caching, is this something that looks like a PyC file? Like, is this an on-disk cache that VA then just like, or engine VM just consumes off disk?
I believe our bytecode cache, at least from the Chakra side, is on disk. Yes.
Okay.
I can discuss. So both have C or C++ APIs. They dump a blob. So technically, we can just load that blob however we want. For V8, we're looking at caching not just the bytecode, but also the mode as well. So when we feed it to the parsers, we feed it to the right parser.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Okay. How would this get around the same issues that existing double parse solutions present, or the same sort of? So the existing problems with double parse, as I understand it, there was the ambiguity. This resolves that. But the other problem was that it required tooling authors to maintain a parser. So, for example, if you're working with Sprockets or Browserify or like Webpack, you have another parser, like have a parser around and know to double parse in order to be able to extract this information.
Great. So we actually consulted with Josh of Sprockets in designing the proposal for this. And we have a section called Tooling Concerns, where it suggests alternatives for this. So it basically links back up to the implementation where we say, hey, the recommendation for Node is cache on disk, but there's other solutions there for people who consume it as just a text blob. And that is with command line flags or manifest files or HTTP headers or file extensions or whatever, etc. From that. So there's other ways that they can go about mandating what kind of file the text file is through various options. When I discussed it with Josh of Sprockets, he didn't see this as a blocker or a anything of significant issue with.
Cool. With regards to the ambiguity, we would resolve the ambiguity in Node. So in a browser that is importing a file that has no import and exports, what would the behavior be then for them?
So I've actually begun discussing this with the dev and spec PM for implementing this inside of Microsoft Edge, and that is still a little bit up in the air. From their standpoint, they've got lots of things to worry about on modules, and so this could just be like thrown onto the stack of that. We haven't worked out yet what that means. In our proposal, we say if you try one mode and there's an option to fall back to another mode, you can fall back to that mode. But depending on the order, eventually it errors out. So that still is a little bit up in the air. I know with the browser mode, you're explicitly opting into ES module when you do type equals module. So maybe there, depending on how we define the fallback, they could say like you've opted into a single mode. And so if yours fails to parse that mode, then it throws an error.
Interesting.
There's also an open issue on our proposal about having a similar kind of opt-in to just a single mode. So like opt-in to ES module mode only.
Would that create a barrier for a Node program to consume a browser module, though? Wouldn't that reintroduce the ambiguity?
So the proposal is saying that we would check against the ECMA 262 spec and change that. It wouldn't be unique to us.
Right.
So if we
But how the
change-
browser handles it, though, is...
Yeah, how the browser actually does its own form of parsing is not covered here. We're talking about changing the spec itself, so you could not parse something without an import or export in the module grammar.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So that would apply to browsers as well. So when they go from the script type modules from that top level module and they import a second level module that doesn't have any imports or exports, when they consume that level of module, the browser, it sounds like it's still a little bit up in the air, but it sounds like we'd be opting into a single mode, and that second level module would be parsed as an ES module by browsers, but not necessarily by Node.
Because it is up in the air, though, I don't want to really speculate too much on that because it is undefined. One of the options is the browser could throw to. They could treat it just like invalid syntax for a normal file. So that's something to still be discussed and ironed out with them.
Cool.
But the big deal is that it would change the spec definition of what is an ES module, and so that would translate into something that does equally affect the browser as Node. So hopefully we could iron out any ambiguity, because the whole point of this is to not have that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I would also just like to note that second level dependency, in order to be an ES module, would still require it to have an import or export under this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's kind of where I was getting the like opt into a single mode thing, because otherwise it would throw. I don't want to like monopolize all the questions. I'm sure others have some questions. I have stuff around modules root, but I can also wait on that.
All right. In terms of single file modules or single file applications, which we sometimes see for like CLI scripts and stuff, is there any reason someone would want to use a module without an import or export that isn't because of implicit strictness? Was there anything else there that we were missing?
So in the future, some things are only going to be targeting the module grammar. So a key one is await is only a reserved word in the module grammar, for example.
That's not good. Wow.
Yeah, my take on modules is that modules is one of the ways that TC39 is trying to migrate to all of the goodness, which use strict was the first approach here, but then modules is like the next approach, which is let's put all the good stuff in here and leave backward compatibility over there. So I would imagine that modules will grow quite a bit. But having to insert some boilerplate in a default export, well, that wouldn't be so bad, would it? It'd just be annoying to have to know to do that.
Yeah, I kind of think it could come down to also best practices. Like, it's nice to be explicit about the intent of your module. So if you're saying your module is intending not to have an export, or export anything, then exporting like a default of null or an empty object would make that clear. It also happens to opt into the ES module though too.
So
it could
Alan Works
be seen as a
Broth
desktop.
actually, yeah. Sorry I interrupted, but
No.
Alan Works Broth actually demonstrated there is a specific syntax for exporting nothing. So if you type export curly braces and then semicolon, you actually are saying export nothing. Don't export default, don't export anything.
Wow, rad. That was actually raised in one of our issues in the proposal just now, so that was good.
The other thing that I noticed is that this still leaves like, okay, maybe tooling can handle this, but it still leaves some ambiguity for people that are actually looking at like what files are in a module, which might be quite large, and you might not be able to see where the import statements are or export statements are directly in the future when other features may be available. What types those files actually are.
This goes back to the treating JavaScript as a flat text file.
I'm not sure about that because this concern is about humans and not tooling.
Oh.
Sorry, can you explain again, Jeremiah?
Right. So the idea is, how are people going to tell like what mode these things might be in if they're coming like new to the ecosystem and trying to make improvements or something on them, and they might not know what features and stuff are available without digging through entire files of some module.
Imports are top level, like they can't be buried in functions or anything like that. So I had envisioned that most would treat them like they do their node modules, where your imports are generally towards the top, and then exports are towards the bottom. So that's how I think that would usually be handled.
And folks are relying more and more on linters these days, and I imagine that ESLint and others would include logic to detect and understand this kind of thing.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
ESLint is actually adding a rule that you must have all imports at top of file.
ESLint is an AST parser, so this doesn't really matter too much for ESLint since it already parses everything.
Right.
My point is though that people who are new, like if you're contributing to an existing module and you're looking at a file and you're saying, well, what is this, a module or a script? Like the ambiguity is there, but presumably linters would pick up any problems you had anyway before trying to execute or test. Like linters would actually help you out, and editors would be able to use this information as well. So the ambiguity would be solved by tooling for the most part, I think. And the ambiguity exists anyway with modules versus script. It's there. They're gonna have to live with it if this moves forward, which it obviously is. So, yeah.
I do wonder how many modules would leave their projects, like just their own, right? Never mind any dependencies or anything, in a state where half of them are modules, and then half of them are CommonJS, right? It just seems weird to me that if somebody's going to go for it, I feel like they're going for it. Why would they leave their module for a year just sprinkled with one or the other?
Dependencies, maybe?
Yeah, what about conditional imports versus like conditional requires? Because you can't conditionally import, can you?
No.
System.import.
There are some other cases of workflows as well, which aren't the same. So we need to be careful about that. Also, some things like some polyfills actually require sloppy mode. So we need to just be mindful.
So a question, getting back to ESLint really quickly as a good example of this. So await is an allowed production identifier name in ES5 and strict mode, but not in module mode. If ESLint has to parse a file in order to look for export and import statements, how are they going to handle like failing on that production? When are they just going to parse everything as a module and then like kind of post facto like fail the parse once they notice that it's not a module but they saw await?
So how most things do it is they don't exactly match the spec grammars. And so for the longest time, actually, ESLint wasn't an AST parser. It was a token parser. I think that changed last year. Basically, things like Babylon, which is Babel's parser, kind of guess at things and verify it after the fact. So.
Cool. I had a question about module root. Is there going to be any? Are we concerned at all about a module setting its root outside of the package?
That is invalid in this spec. You cannot start with a ... or an absolute path.
But you could start with a dot and then lead into a ... or go through a symlink.
I'm okay with the symlink idea, but yeah, we should probably explicitly state it can't jump out of it directly.
Does modules.root also imply ES module mode, or is it simply just a true?
It's a true. So you can have technically CommonJS inside of your modules.root. There's actually a note in the proposal about the side effects of including modules.root. It can be used kind of like true for a namespacing mechanism, but it's not a security mechanism.
Does everybody understand the need for modules.root here? I know that it's not obvious when first thinking about it.
It's the support back compat.
Yes, it's
fat
for
packages.
There's two things we get from it. One is having two entry points. Having two entry points, one for Node versions that support modules, and one's for Node that doesn't support modules. That allows us to ship packages that have both CommonJS and ES modules side by side, but resolve against the preferred one. And the other is for deep linking. This was pointed out in the defense of JS, and it's actually kind of an interesting approach to it. So right now, if I do require readable stream / readable.js, I'll be able to actually get the inner file of a package. And so in the wild, people actually do this for various things. Yeah, we just can't remove that behavior. So what was introduced was modules.root. And this basically says when you enter a package, jump to a directory within that package and resolve against that. So if I do something like require readable stream / readable.js, if readable stream had a modules.root, it could actually go to a dist folder or something before it resolves the readable.js.
And we're preferring this over the sniffing for having an index.js at the similar name at package level or at name, like nested name level, if that makes sense. So assuming we were to land modules, we would grow a vm.create module. And then when you required a package, it would require the index and it could check for create module. or if you were to do a require a/b, b could be a directory within the package with an index.js that did the same.
I'm not quite following you on that one, Chris.
I can answer it, but that's a very confusing question. I can answer it because we want deep requires to continue to work, so requires inside of packages. We can't really just do the index.js and check for if vm.create module exists. That makes sense? Because if we have, yeah.
But if you created a directory named B inside your package A and a consumer was requiring a/b, we would resolve a/b/index, so we could continue to do, like, I guess what my core question is
oh, sorry.
Oh, I guess my core question is how tied together is the module's root with the resolving ambiguity? Are they severable?
So the resolving ambiguity is separate, but modules.root is what would get us packages that can ship both modes, which is probably going to be important during any sort of transition period.
But you could have modules.root in a package that's only CJS where you wanted to redirect for some reason somewhere else. Right?
Yes, so
No, because
React. Yes.
that wouldn't work. That would only work with newer versions of Node that support modules.root. So you could have fat packages for just CJS, old and new. Is that the?
Yes, so I'm going to preface this by whatever I'm talking about modules.root implies that we're talking about a version of Node that supports modules.root. Modules.root is not directly related to ES modules themselves. They're this is a necessary construct in order to ship packages that have both, but it has some other effects. So one that Josh just talked about was a purely common JS module could have a modules.root, and modules.root would make it resolve against whatever the value is. So React actually has called me out on this because they have problems with people requiring internal only JS files. And then big things break when they update those internal only JS files. So it would give a namespacing mechanism for them also, so that you couldn't grab these internal only things. So inside your modules.root, you could provide only the files you want to be accessible to the outside world.
Okay, hold on a second.
It's worth noting that requiring internal files is actually a common pattern amongst a significant portion of the Node community. So it's not just this odd behavior. For a lot of people, it's actually how they prefer to use Node. And Renos is one example of this. It's his preferred way of exporting stuff.
Is modules.root, does that point to the older version or the newer version? Like, does that point to what older versions would look for common JS files, or does it point to if it exists, is that where we look for ES6 modules?
That's where you would look for ES6 modules.
Okay, right. Okay,
Not
so that basically
necessarily,
means
right?
that
Not
we are.
necessarily. I thought
Not
that's what.
necessarily, just the intended the reason it's in the proposal is its intended use is for that's where the ES6 modules would go. But of course, you could mix modes. I mean, you could have common JS modules in there too.
Okay, just noting, like, if we add that, like, it's going to be used for other things and namespacing, and we probably need to think about it further. We should take it back to the issue or wherever it's being discussed on GitHub.
Sure.
So how do I haven't thought about this one, but maybe there's a good answer. But how are browsers approaching this idea of transition period? Is there any thought put into the fact that people will want to support old browsers but also use modules? How does that work? Do you just have a script tag with module and that just doesn't get read by? Like, how do they do that? I don't understand.
So I can explain.
Sure, go for it.
So if you declare a type that is unknown to a browser right now, the browser is going to skip it. So if you have a script type equals module, older Chrome, Firefox, Safari, whatever, that doesn't support module will skip that script tag. I think in one case it'll actually download the file, but it won't do anything with it. But so on that behavior, we don't really have a good story. But for the story about what if I'm in a newer browser and I need to load old files, you should look to the WhatWG loader spec and probably talk to Carity Patino. He can go in depth. There are a bunch of loader hooks that they're implementing, and we're probably going to implement similar once we get our base support out the door. Yeah.
With the script type equals module, do they load these asynchronously by default now, or do you have to still have the async tag attribute in there?
I think it's async by default, but I would have to double check.
I believe it's by default.
Okay, so even doing something like having another script tag that checks if that's been loaded, and if it hasn't, inserting another script tag to load your script. That's does that suggest that we're the only ones thinking about transition here, or is there a bigger story that we're missing out on? Like, are we being criticized because we have to take into account transition period, or do browsers have a story there? I know they've got a great story for detection. Type equals module is great. So we're concerned about detection, but we're also very concerned about transition period. Are browsers just not concerned about that?
I don't have a clear answer there. As far as I know, the type equals module is what they've got.
Too vague a question, and it's not really one for us.
I don't have a clear answer for anything about older browsers working in a type equals module world, but in a type equals module world, they do have a story for loading older scripts like jQuery.js or whatever.
Is that the system import stuff?
No, this is the WhatWG loader has hooks that let you do source code transforms and would let you execute things under the script goal. But that's a very long discussion and probably not suited for here.
Okay, so what would you like from us at this stage? Are you more interested in informing, or are you after a gut feel? How would you like to take this forward with this group?
So I was looking for your opinions on that, and then also moving it forward as an alternative or replacement for the current detection mechanism, which is .mjs.
I'll need to think about it a bit.
So I would say it's informative right now, but let's try to get some opinions and any pending questions out before next week, so we can discuss a little bit about if we can pursue this approach further. Does that make sense?
It does. My initial gut reaction is simply that .mjs solves all of our technical concerns. It's straightforward, simple, easy to grok, but I guess we have to be aware, and we are aware of bigger concerns out there. You know, people that are you know, very attached to .js and don't want Node to undermine that. And yeah, so I guess we have to take into account some bigger factors than just solving our technical problems, but that's kind of tricky to have to do. Okay, let's wrap that up then. And should we take discussion to that repo? Is that the best place to continue discussion on this?
Yeah, we can take issues there.
Okay, let's do that. We don't really have time for public QA. Is people okay with skipping that for now? Because that's like we're over time. Yeah, maybe we'll reserve that for next week.
I sent out a question earlier, and no one has come up with any questions, so I think we're good.
Okay. Well, let's close up our meeting then. Last chance to object to me closing it out, but thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Bradley and John David Dalton for joining. It's been informative, and we'll see everyone next week.